Osmislany, musilny, slavny, potужногорang. Good morning. Well, in Lviv, there's practically a revolution going on. People stood up against the draft enforcement officers, and not just one or two people, but hundreds. They rose up against the lawlessness of those very manhunters who, well, you can call them people, of course, but still. And, it all started when a draft enforcement officer suddenly jumped out. The draft enforcement officer, they gathered there to bundle a 20-year-old citizen into a van. Let me remind you, it's allowed from 23 to 60 years old. When something went wrong, perhaps the Ukrainians, he struck the civilian on the back of the head. Naturally, all of this was documented. Of course, it was all filmed, just like the influential leaders in the Luhansk region say with actors. Well, it's clear that there are signs here, let's say, that this is Lviv. And these very people jumping out from the cars. Military recruiters rushing at and beating civilians. Then there are some of them who reach for their pistols. If anyone knows, write about it in the comments. They shout, suddenly start recording, and feel like they're still powerful in this world. And here are these videos. I'll say right away, there are several of them, and there are screams and swearing. Well, you know what an angry crowd shouts. That's why YouTube doesn't allow this kind of content. I show it in full on my Telegram channel. Here's this Telegram channel. Just point your smartphone or tablet camera at it, and it'll take you right where you need to go. If you're watching me from a mobile device, of course, this method won't work for you, so just click the link. It's right here in the video description. Well, let's keep watching. Look, now there's a confrontation. The draft enforcement guys aren't giving up. They're shouting that their authority is above all else. And in the end, the citizens have had enough. They've reached their limit. First, they kicked them out, of course, and then they just started rocking the car. It didn't work the first time, but then on the second try, they managed to do it. The whole thing is shaking, and then it flips over upside down, let's say, with some rhymes. And all of this, well, just look at it from afar. See how many people have gathered over this act of injustice. And take a closer look, too. I think everyone understands this. You can compress a spring, squeeze it, but in the end, it will spring back. And, well, it's an example for those people catchers in armed forces of Ukraine uniforms for reasons that aren't clear. Here, they're undressing one of them. I'll be clicking through this quickly because YouTube really doesn't welcome violence and all that. But again, you can watch the full video on my Telegram channel. Anyway, they stripped this guy, even though he was shouting that he wasn't going to undress. And instead of saying rozdyagatishya, which is to undress in Ukrainian, he said razdevatsya. So basically it's Surzik. They themselves don't even speak Ukrainian, the language they talk so much about on TV. Then after all that, there was suddenly a statement from Zelensky, who was at yet another super important meeting with NATO. Of course, they didn't accept him into NATO, but it turns out Zelensky has ideas on how to bring peace closer, can you imagine? It's now the 6th year, and he still seeks ways to bring peace. He summarized his talks with Donald Trump at the NATO summit in Ankara. He called the meeting good and expressed gratitude for the important emphasis on strengthening Ukraine's air defense to better protect lives. And here's where an interesting incident happened. The thing is, Zelensky always wanted to communicate with Trump, and journalists kept asking Trump about Ukraine all the time. Trump mixed up Ukraine and Iran, talking about Iran instead of Ukraine. I don't know why or for what reason. Maybe he didn't really want to talk about Ukraine and instead wanted to talk about Iran. Let me remind you that military actions against Iran have resumed, suddenly and completely unexpectedly, with both sides accusing each other. But apparently Iran started shelling ships, oil tankers that weren't theirs, and the US forces responded immediately. Plus, they revoked Iran's permission to sell oil and immediately launched strikes on Iranian targets. At the same time, both sides are arranging the next round of peace talks. In short, in my opinion, both sides are trying to profit, and of course, guess who profits the most? Help the author guess in the comments who is trying to profit from this, from the volatility and price of oil, and is actually succeeding. Moreover, they later say that this person's relatives have insider information, and the insider information is quite significant. That's why the whole clan is making money. Write in the comments, and let's try to guess together again. What else? Trump suddenly promised Ukraine a license to produce Patriot missiles. I'm unsure how they'd be produced in Ukraine, but apparently it will be possible. Some factories will be built somewhere, and they hope that they won't be destroyed. That's also quite strange, because such a factory isn't like drone production that you can set up in a kindergarten somewhere. It's a pretty large factory. Electronics. There has to be electronics and the appropriate equipment. Everything there is big. And, well, Trump said that, but on the other hand, a promise doesn't mean he'll actually follow through. He can promise something and then take it back. How is it? God gave, God took. Well, in general, Trump, since he already thinks so highly of himself, he even compares himself to Lenin now. This is not a joke. He actually has a recording like that. And so he can make a promise and he can take it back, and I'm sure he won't consider himself guilty for breaking that promise. Well, it's just that life circumstances allow him to take back his promise, because at this moment, at this point in time, it works in his favor. And that's exactly what he does. Then, since they continue the war, I'll show again what happened to Vishnev, that suburb of Kiev, where about 80 houses were completely demolished. In fact, and it was because of a detonation. Shells, as they are called in Ukrainian sources, just like in Russian sources before, explosions were called loud pops. Now they call them objects, military objects. Instead of shells, they say military objects. As if even the dumbest hedgehog out in the middle of nowhere doesn't understand that we're talking about munitions that detonate under the influence of an explosion. Well, that's what happened. Here it's shown just at the edge, but all of this has been destroyed. It's impossible to live there anymore. And apparently they plan to continue until something like this happens all over Ukraine. Well, of course, it's scary to see something like this, and for those who live there, it's not just scary, but, well, let's not talk about the bad things. Although we keep talking about the bad things all the time. In short, Suddenly, after all these shellings of Kyiv, Kuleba, the former foreign minister, appeared and said that if it's hard for you in Kyiv, then go ahead and move. Just go ahead and move. And Kuleba, obviously, is not a poor man here. After all, as the foreign minister, he was getting a salary of 60,000 hryvnias, so he probably saved up quite a lot. He and his wife also opened 2 more adult stores, also with money that, as you can guess, came from his ministerial position. Well, they're just talented entrepreneurs. And now Kuleba is saying, well, instead of the shovels he wanted to take to the front, now he's telling people that it's better to leave large populated areas if you suddenly find it hard to stay under shelling. If you're homeless, just buy a house, says Kuleba. Well, actually, no, that's not what Kuleba said. That was just a meme, but it's very similar. Or, to paraphrase, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. That was one of the close associates of the King of France. France, let me remind you, she was executed there, but this phrase is distorted. It was changed. It didn't actually sound like that. She actually meant more or less reasonable things. But nevertheless, what we know is this.
People who can or should stay in Kiev and other major cities do so, while those who can't handle it have a temporary place of their own elsewhere.
Continuation. Those who live in Kiev and other major cities, says Kuleba, should continue to live there. If it's hard for you, then don't keep living. Living, in general, do what you have to do. If you don't, then don't. That'll be 5,000 for the consultation. Kuleba is just really talented, honestly. An activist, a manager, an administrator, there's a lot mixed into one person here. So many talents, you can't even see them all at once. They're all somewhere in there. Amazing, amazing. It's time to go. And we see how hard it is with the new missile strike on Kiev. I mean, you bring food to the table and then you go to the gathering wherever your heart leads.
To move there. And we see how, with each new missile strike on Kiev... Yes, I understand. These emotions are building up. People I talk to from Sumy and Zaporizhzhia are already on edge.
And why are they doing this, I wonder? It's like there's even a joke about it. My fans constantly ask me, why do you think we're your fans? It's the same with Kuleba. He's always talking to someone. Well, so far the only interview I've seen him do was with his own wife, sitting in the other room. Who would call him and why? Well, for example, if I lived in Sumy, the last person I would call would be Kuleba. How can he communicate with ordinary people if he doesn't interact with them at all? He lives in his own world, in his own, as Ukrainians say, informational bubble. In other words, a soap bubble, but just an informational one. And during wartime, he was going around to restaurants, tasting all sorts of Crucian carp with sour cream. Now he claims that he communicates with ordinary people. Where exactly?
Just 2 days ago, he spoke with people from Kherson, but they're really on the edge.
Yeah? Where? With some crony of his who opened his 8th business on the edge?
Well, and unfortunately, I don't have any good news because it's better not to bet on it.
Ah, yeah, it won't get any better. Can you imagine analytics at the level of God? This is just some admiral, not a minister, not even a former foreign affairs minister, Admiral Obvious. And this Admiral Obvious says that it will only get worse in the future. But I thought that if there's a war in the country, and if none of the top officials want peace, then life would only get better, the economy would grow, and people would live better. Turns out, no. That's kind of strange. Write in the comments what you think about Kuleba's analytical abilities too. Well, I think it's genius. Just imagine to single out this thought from all the informational chaos that's pressing down on us right now, and to explain it to us clearly. That during wartime, during economic, social, political, or any kind of problems, life won't get better. That's wonderful. That's perfect.
Because the worse the situation gets for Russia in the war, the harsher it will become.
Ah, I see, I get it. So, corruption, yeah, we've heard about corruption today. By the way, I already showed you in the previous video that same Kuleba talking about it too. If you haven't seen it, check out the previous video. It's right below this one. And he was saying that, of course, there's corruption in Ukraine, but can you imagine there's even more corruption in India? But India is such a rich country. People in India live very hard lives, but look how rich they all are. So Kuleba concludes we don't need to fight corruption. We'll manage anyway. We'll be the second Switzerland or the third.
Sometimes I wonder how it could get harsher, but a fact is a fact. Look at what they're doing to Donbass and the cities of Donetsk region. Believe me, they have no restraints or safeguards, nothing stopping them or making them consider what's humane. It's a culture they've inherited.
A little digression.
Cultural heritage is very important for people who live in poverty. It was especially notable on Ukraine's part, again in Kiev, to demolish monuments to Pushkin, Dostoevsky. Those are cultural landmarks. That's not it. That's something else. It's completely different. Yeah, well, Kuleba did well, huh? Saying things like that. Well, what can you do? All that's left is to applaud this third-rate genius. Some people in interviews often say, Vladimir Alexandrovich, our hero, we need to return to the 1991 borders. And one of these heroines talking about the 1991 borders and how we need to go back to them is an elderly woman who talks about the work of the Territorial Recruitment Center. Yes, we saw her. She ran out of the car and punched an innocent young man in the back of the head, someone you can't even drag into a van for mobilization because he's only 20. He's 20 and not subject to conscription. The draft officers are upset that they couldn't help the front, more precisely to get the payment for another draft target they've bagged. Well, there you have your heroes. And here they're being supported. Here's a lady in a pot-shaped hat.
They approached you, checked your documents, found a mismatch, and responded as required.
Here she is, and now listen. They asked her, do you have any relatives? And if yes, where are your male relatives located?
Moments later.
My child lives in Norway, yes.
She is apparently defending there. She is trying to stretch Ukraine's borders all the way to Norway. Apparently that's the plan. And there they are probably in close contact with the draft officers again, so that at the right moment they can come to help their homeland. Well, that's right, isn't it? Well, since this old lady says how much you need to listen to the recruitment office, if you have a problem with your documents, it's your own fault. Well, sons and nephews. Or in Kiev. Or the grandson. The child, in short, lives in Norway. This child, son, probably not a grandson after all. She's definitely around 30 years old, and I think she's liable for military service. A few are liable for military service.
A few moments. First of all.
After all, I think that the occupied territories should become ours.
Babushka keeps going strong. Child in Norway, the occupied territories should be ours.
That is to restore the 1991 borders.
Great, I think, but look how active these people are. So, she understands that nothing gets done if you just sit there, and that's why she's talking as much as she can to try to fix the situation. Her child is in prison. By the way, there are absolutely no complaints about the child. Well, I'm actually mocking the circus performer, or rather her words, that a draft-eligible citizen of Norway is in prison, and there wouldn't be any questions for her personally if she didn't also talk about the 91 border and the 95 border, and about how she's going to go and capture something, conquer, sink her teeth into the enemy, and carry out some next steps. And immediately you remember what Zelensky said on the edge when he was just about to become president at all those rallies in the background. Look, his wife is also standing there gazing lovingly at the back of his head, right here.
We will see that we are not making up any schemes. We really want God. All we want is to live in a normal, free, democratic country.
Well, it became exactly the democratic country we expected. Look, people live there, there is a free democratic country, they look around, everything is great for them. So these people have achieved it. So, my friend and I were talking and we were telling each other about politics, just chatting. And suddenly he said something like, he said, Max, listen, do you realize that our goals might just not match their goals? Well, I mean those very counts, princes, the upper echelons, the internet elites who started all this. So they have some goal of their own, and they're gradually achieving it. Well, I showed that. We have our own goal, to live well in a democratic country, as Zelensky said. But first of all, our idea of a democratic country doesn't match theirs. And again, our idea of living well doesn't match either. So, who gets to live well? They live well and have achieved their goal. And as for the democratic country part, for them it really is democratic. Do you know why? Simply because they can say what they think, they can do what they want, and they do. They can go wherever they want, the borders aren't closed for them. So these people really do live well. They live in a democratic country. Everything is great for them. Zelensky has achieved his goal.
That's it. If there's someone like Svinerchuk, I think the president should come from our side. I think if you want to stop the war, then you definitely will stop it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. There are many more statements like this, but of course they won't help us, but it's still very interesting to listen to all of this. As for Lviv, Zelensky achieved such friendly relations that the black and red flag was torn apart live on air. This is Deputy Kinia of the Polish Parliament, the Sejm, and she is telling this story.
Today we should never agree to Ukraine joining Europe. Down with Banderite Nazism. Thank you.
Well, that's how these powerful leaders operate. I mean, basically they probably established some kind of relations, but also their own kind. They won't help us in any way, but they'll have relations of their own. And we've watched all these little videos. Now, you know what's next? Of course, powerful leaders, because we can't do without them. That's wonderful. Also, I think we just need to see who will speak today, but let's have Levensky. We can't do without Levensky.
Well then, let's listen to the clowns.
Go ahead, comrades.
Levensky invited these comrades who are not really our comrades, and we can listen to them. Well, here is one of the characters who hasn't yet come under Zelensky's sanctions. Let me remind you, it's Bereza. That's his nickname. His name is Bliaka. He came under sanctions. Then Omelian came under sanctions. These are all mighty warriors who took photos and videos. They were taking selfies somewhere on the 10th line, and then they demobilized and said, well, we're veterans. Recently, this same Bliacher was saying, I'm a veteran, so why aren't you going to fight? Well, these are the same kind of veterans. On the left is Lapin Igor Zla, who is the son of a judge. He's always had a silver spoon somewhere. You can guess where. Same thing in the comments. On the right is a legal genius without a law degree, former prosecutor general, former minister of internal affairs Yuri Lutsenko, who is always filmed with books in the background. Well, he wants to look like, he's read them.
A leader is needed. There is no leader in Europe.
There is a leader in Europe. We all know who he is.
At this moment, Europe has neither Churchill, nor Merkel, nor Thatcher.
Yes, that's the one. Churchill is dead, Yura. Churchill has been dead for a long time. Of course, I don't want to upset anyone, but that's just how it turned out.
He's spouting that kind of stuff. And so I'll say it again. I hope that the Ukrainian presidential elections could give such a president, a military leader.
Yeah, a military one. Ukraine needs a military leader, so that's just what was missing, like when a person falls and then a tree falls on them and then you hit them with a crowbar on top of that. Now that would be a twist.
That would also give meaning to Ukraine's acceptance into the EU. So we need to make it clear.
Oh, guys, yeah, I get it. Guys, really, guys, says Yura. I mean, I just didn't really get it. First we find a European leader and then we go charging into Europe. But how are we supposed to find a European leader if he's not in Europe yet? What's going on? I don't even try to understand this logic anymore because there just isn't any...
We will be the key pillar of defense, but we want to understand that we are protecting our common home.
I'll again ask the soldiers and officers on the front lines if they want to defend Europe, though it's rhetorical, but Yura does want to do exactly that. Then go to the front and defend Europe somewhere out there. Well,
That's why you need a confident, serious, professional leader with a military and political perspective. That's what Ukraine should be thinking about.
they likely both mean Zaluzhny. Honestly, it's hard to understand what these people are thinking, as their thoughts seem disjointed. But apparently they mean Zaluzhny. Well, so what? Let's watch another one. This guy with shifty eyes who can't focus on anything except apparently some objects behind him says that responsibility for your fate and your family rests on you alone. He says this while sitting once again in a cozy studio. Well, that's all I can say here. I don't know, it's one thing when a soldier is telling something, even if he's swearing from the front lines, well, that's one thing. I mean about who should serve and who shouldn't, if it's a real soldier. On the other hand, if you've made your choice, why are you sending others off to die? Well, that's something completely different. It's when some characters with shifty eyes are sitting there and trying to tell people what to do. But really, who are they anyway? Why are they the ones telling us? They tell us who should do what. But they're nobody, they don't even have a name, they're not even some kind of official, not even a minor one, not even a veteran, for God's sake. It's just some random person sitting there and saying something.
Every citizen basically should understand that, well, there are ways in which you can defend the state. There's a part that concerns the responsibility of local authorities. But as for responsibility...
My eyes were darting around so much, honestly they probably just popped out because you have to take in so much space in just 1 second. Maybe... Of course, the wallpaper behind that journalist is interesting. Maybe something else. Maybe we just don't get it. Maybe he's being called to lunch and his eyes started darting around like, damn, what's going on right now? But I don't know.
And as for your family, well, that's your business. Whether to go to the shelter or not, well, that's up to you. Well, that's the reality we live in. Well, and in the near future, in the context of these resources, well, it's unlikely to change.
Well, of course, it will change. Kuleba also said that things will get worse and worse. Well, and you just keep on fighting, as they say. That's how things are. I mean, everything is going strong, everything is great. We live in a democratic country, but not us, it's them, well, and everyone is where they are. Well, in general, that's how it is. Everything will get worse. Wonderful. That's the main takeaway from this video. I mean, several people have already said everything will get worse. But, as I also mentioned in the video yesterday, or rather, yes, I did, someone there was talking about people from Crimea, that they should endure for the sake of... Oh, right, Budanov said that, yes. People from Crimea should endure, be without electricity, without gasoline, without food, without water, in order to achieve the higher goal, to return to their home, to Ukraine. He said this without hesitation, looking straight into the camera and saying it. So, that's how it is. On this note, let me say goodbye. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Bye, everyone.
We haven't been kids for a long time, and we've finished growing up. Where's the sky? Where's the wind? Where's the joy that lies ahead? Where is the sky? Where is the wind? Where is the joy that lies ahead? Editor.